This is Keep Up. I'm your host, Cynthia Dill. It's Wednesday, June 4th, 2025. Yeah, 2025. I'm in my Cape Elizabeth studio, and I'm very pleased to have with us tonight a very special guest, Marcia Matthews. Welcome to the show, Marcia.
Thank you, Cynthia.
So I saw on your Substack published recently that you don't like June. In fact, you said you want to take
Oh,
back June
thank
and that
you.
pride is cringe. So I want to talk to you a little bit about that, Marcia. Why, first of all, why do you have standing really in this issue? Why is it important to you? And what do you mean by pride is cringe?
Because a lot of my gay friends resent that this is all being done in our name. And the kinky people who call themselves queer, it's very offensive to us. That word was used against us back in the day. And there's nothing to be proud about. Why do I hate pride? It's just, I don't know, it's embarrassing. It's like a whole month of shame for gay people.
Are you a member of the LGBTQ plus community?
No, I'm a member of the LGB. I'm B.
And why is it important to you to distinguish LGB from the LGBTQ plus?
Because the TQ plus are basically spicy straights. They don't know, who they are really. They're not authentic. They're not being real. They're not embodied in their own body. They're disassociated.
Marcia, you have quite an accomplished history. You're a published author, published poems. You've been on television. You describe yourself as a rad femme since 1975.
That's
Uh,
right.
and rumor has it that you've sort of engaged in some pretty radical behavior, including, I heard, shooting up a porn shop in Boston. Is that true?
Well, I didn't shoot up a porn shop. It was in Harvard Square, and I fired one bullet through the window of a store that sold pornography just to make a point. And it was late at night, no one was in the store, and they didn't even notice the bullet hole. And so I went back the next day and posted a notice. Daughters of Artemis fired a bullet through your window because you exploit women.
And do you see any connection between pornography's exploitation of women and the current trend of the LGBTQ plus movement?
Yes, I think that pornography causes 8 paraphilias, and one of them is misogyny. There's also pedophilia, there's also zoophilia, and a lot of them are just like kinks or fetishes of mostly men. And it's definitely harmful to other people. It isn't an innocent or harmless practice.
What is a paraphilia?
It's a fetish. It's like your sex drive gets warped or depraved into some weird outlet, like you must have violence, you must have BDSM, you must have a child victim, etc.
And how has your activism evolved over time? Have you been engaged in any recent protests or activities that are, kind of counterculture?
Well, I have been to some events like Speaker's Corner in London, and I've been to Seattle, and we did have to run the gauntlet of protesters. I wasn't um, doing anything active except sitting in the audience and um, trying to support the speakers, Karadansky, Megan Murphy, and others.
Now, those women that you just described are considered, I think, and proudly by them as TERFs, and you and I have common ground because we're part of an organization, the New England Women's Solidarity, which describes itself as gender critical feminists. Could you describe for, say, like, I don't know, a high school audience, if you were to explain what a gender critical feminist is? What is it? What are we?
Well, feminism is supporting women no matter who they are. If there's a woman you don't like, if they're a woman in another country, or just someone that you don't agree with on anything else, but for women to have rights and equality and not be sidetracked by any other cause.
And is gender critical in any way different from, a sex realist? What's a sex realist?
Someone that accepts biology and you've had a course, Biology 101, the cells, the skeleton, the hormones, all of it. It's like the anatomy of a woman is so different than the anatomy of a man, and to deny that is just lunacy.
So it seems like, there's somewhat of a generation gap, because what I read recently, and just today, as a matter of fact, in preparing for this interview, there's some Pew research done that showed like over 65% of trans adults are under the age of 30. And so it seems to me there's a real gap here between generations. But is it only women our age who are sex realists and gender critical, or have you observed other young people coming on board to this idea that women's rights should be paramount to the sexual fantasies of some men?
Well, definitely the British women are very inspiring. There are young ones, there are women in their 30s, women in their 70s. And, I think the next generation coming up, the one after the millennials, I think they call them the Z generation, they are not on board with this. They're tired of it.
What do you think happened? I mean, you're a scholar. I mean, you've published books, you've written books, you've like I said, been around the block on this issue, widely respected. What's your thoughts on how it happened that there was this surge of young people um, somehow being convinced that the medical community could offer a recipe or an antidote to their angst in adolescence? How did we fail as a society, this young generation?
I think it was partly the COVID crisis when everyone was shut in and they had internet. And I think watching the internet too much, you're going to get a lot of bad ideas that, they're not true. They're like propaganda. And plus, the media didn't help because they were promoting it constantly and you couldn't escape it. It was always TQ plus, TQ plus.
Have you felt that your attempts to be vocal about your thoughts on this issue have been met with, obstruction from friends and family? Has it caused a divide between you and people that you love, speaking up for women's rights in this movement of TQ plus?
It does temporarily cause a rift. I had something happen with my cousin last summer that I was trying to explain to her what children are being taught in school, SOGI in Massachusetts. SOGI, it's like
What is that?
sexual,
SOGI.
it's sexual orientation and gender ideology, and they're like lumping them all together. And plus, I don't think children K through 6 need to know anything about sex or sexuality.
Especially if they
Um,
can't read.
yeah, they can't even read, and they're bringing in like drag queen story hour, and we want you to be tolerant of strange men in dresses.
How do you feel about the whole women in sports and trans women playing in sports? How has that changed over the years based on what you've observed?
I think that awareness is growing now. I mean, when I was, in my 20s, men were too proud. They would not even think of going into women's sports. But today, men have seemed to like stoop so low, and I just don't understand it.
Well, yeah, here in Maine, where are you right now? In Massachusetts?
I'm almost on the Rhode Island border,
Oh, okay.
southern
Well, in
southern
Maine,
Mass.
as you may know, in Maine, we're having quite a conversation about girls' sports, girls and women's sports, because in Maine, we've adopted in law this concept of gender identity and gender expression. And so boys can essentially just declare without any medical documentation whatsoever, they can just declare that they're identifying as a girl and play on girls' teams. And they've taken the podium, first place in, several state championships, and it's caused a lot of discomfort. But the legislature is so divided on this issue, but we have bills that are just coming up for a vote. And despite the research that shows overwhelmingly Americans, for the most part, like over 65%, believe that biological boys should not play on girls' teams, the Democrats in Maine are still, full on board with it. And the Democrats in Maine have passed what I consider to be radical laws that allow 16-year-olds to get these cross-sex hormones without parent consent, that have we in Maine now have a law that defines female as anyone who declares themselves to be a woman regardless of biology. So from your view, how are these issues going to play out in politics? I mean, it's just almost unimaginable that I would be going into the voting booth and supporting Republicans, but I'm tempted. I've dropped out of the Democratic Party. I'm no longer a Democrat. And it seems
Mm.
to me that Republicans are actually embracing this issue in a way that really speaks to me. Where politically do you see this issue?
Well, I think we lost the election because of this, because they documented a 2.7% drop in voters because of this issue.
Oh,
I s-
really?
yeah, I saw that somewhere. I can't cite the source right now, but it struck me that, yeah, they lost the election because of this, and they're going to continue losing elections. Why? What is so great about this? Are they getting big donations from these people? Or I don't know, maybe there's money behind it? I have no idea why they're supporting this.
It seems like in Maine, it's a lot of special interest groups that do get, funding. They're just, to me, it's similar to like the NRA's influence on and power over Republicans a few years ago. Not so much anymore, but there was a time where if you were a Republican and you voted against the NRA position, well, you were toast. They would fund a primary against you and support anyone who's
Yeah.
against you. And I don't know if that same type of pressure is here in Maine, but I do know that there was one Democrat in the House who voted against a late-term abortion bill, and these special interest groups that are running the show here, primaried him, and now he's out. And so the Democrats in Maine they only have like a couple of votes more than the House Republicans, but they're going to vote on this issue of trans athletes,
Mm.
boys playing on girls' teams, and I think they're gonna win, and then we'll see what happens at the next election. It's just, as you said, it's just amazing to me. What happened in the past? You've been at this issue of defending and protecting women's rights since 1975, and like I said,
Yeah.
if anyone who's watching
Yeah.
the show is
I
interested in your
wanna
work.
I wanna show you my first book, Pornography: A License to Kill. I showed where a lot of the women that were being murdered, and we were having a real problem with slasher murders and slasher movies, a lot of exploitation. And here's an ad for slasher movie at the Astor and a snuff film at the Astor. So we were really getting a lot of violent pornography directed against us, and now it's all over the internet. So I'm not surprised that kids are confused and that men are very, um, addicted to that because they want to feel power over women, and if that's the way, then they'll do it.
What's gonna happen inside the community that started? I mean, getting back to Pride, right? I mean, Pride was in celebration after the Stonewall riots in Manhattan, in
Hmm.
Greenwich Village, and initially, I think it was gay and lesbian, although I've read recently that there were some transgender people involved in the early days of the movement. But
I
what
don't
do you
know.
think is gonna happen to you know, I call it the Alphabet Club, and I don't mean that necessarily in a derogatory way. It's just, the group that identifies themselves by LBGTQ+. What do you see? Do you have any insight into the inside circle of the leaders of this group, if there are any leaders, and what's gonna happen?
Well, when it first started out, Pride was one day, and it was one parade, and we had a parade in Boston, and it was just friendly, maybe 100 people, and it was pretty quiet event. It wasn't that exciting or anything, and there wasn't too much kinky stuff going on. People were dressed modestly. And then it turned into something like a big sex show with humans who, dress like dogs and are paraded on a leash, and it's like Saturnalia. Um, so what was your question again?
Well,
How
just
do,
so how what are the people inside this, community gonna do about it, do you think? Are there leaders inside? Like, are there lesbian and gay and bisexual people who are protesting within the alphabet club to separate or to somehow tamp down some of the like hypersexual, so it seems hypersexualized to me. That's what I don't like, is that in Maine we also have now state sponsored drag queens who show
oh.
up at like fishing and hunting events that involve children and families, and the drag queen name is Letta Dickin. And I just
Mm,
personally find, I mean, I'm no
true.
prude. I support drag. I mean, I was an English major and yeah, like I get it that it's a it's a dramatic way of expressing yourself. But I mean, what do you think that leaders, either lesbian, gay, bisexual leaders can do to kind of tone down the hypersexuality of it?
We'll have to raise awareness. We're not involved in that. Like I said, it's mostly straight people that are promoting it, and they're like, "Oh, I'm kinky because I have two boyfriends or something," and they think they're, somehow on the spectrum of, this alphabet. And no, you're not. You're just straight, There's LGBS. That's all there is. There isn't any such, you know, other letters.
What do you J.K. Rowling, of course, is somebody who I greatly admire, not only because I love the books that she writes, but mostly because she has just been the face of courage for women in England and online. And I think, in large part, perhaps her efforts helped lead to the decision in the UK defining sex on the basis of biology. Um, I don't see. Is there anyone in the States that comes close to her stature in leadership in this move? Who can people look to?
Oh my.
Um,
I think maybe Kara Dansky, she's a great thinker. She's a lawyer and she writes a lot on Substack and so forth. Um, so she takes the legal point of view. Jamie Reed's been very brave, and she's the
what's her story
whistleblower.
about? What's her story about?
She was a whistleblower at a clinic, a gender clinic in Missouri, and she quit and she started talking, telling everyone what was going on in there. And um, the CAS review and the HHS, I think it is, review, they've determined that like 80% of the kids that are sent to gender clinics, it's because they're non-conforming and proto-gay. They might grow up to be gay. And if, they're that used to be tolerated. It used to be, okay, my girl's a tomboy. She's sporty, she's independent. Or my boy's, he's artistic, he's a dancer, whatever. It used to be tolerated, free to be you and me. But now it's like, oh no, let's wipe out those strange children and let's change them and make them basically non-functional patients for life. Once you medicalize that child and halt puberty and give them wrong sex hormones, their side effects are horrendous.
That's what it just scares me to death that these children are being faced with that. And the other thing that scares me, and I actually learned this by reading your Twitter feed and some of the information that you had on it. And since we're here, how do people follow you on Twitter? What's your handle?
Goldie Lions.
Okay, because it's informative. You do post helpful things. But one of the posts was, I can't think of the doctor's name, the English, she has an English accent. She was being interviewed, and she was saying that the reason why this fight continues with such a vengeance is that so many parents who participated in the transition of their children just can't accept that what they did was so wrong. So
Yeah.
they're just determined to just try to convince everybody that they were right. And that
Yep. The sunk cost fallacy. Like, I've sunk so much into this. Now I have to throw good after bad.
It
That I think you're talking about Helen Joyce.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
Helen Joyce.
yeah.
What do you know about her?
Well, she's an author and, what is her I'm not sure what her degree is in, but, she's very factual. She's got a very quick mind and a command of all the facts. It's amazing to see her in an interview. She can just whip off these facts and she never gets thrown. She never gets angry. She's always very professional, very calm. And, recently she was on Women's Hour and BBC Women's Hour. They haven't really had many feminists on. They've been kind of bought out, captured by the, prevailing um, notion.
It seems like groupthink. It just I mean, I don't know what else to call it. It's amazing to me that even the AP, proscribes, like, how you can't say this, you can't say that, you have to say this, you have to call these things. I just I'm so glad that finally there's people opening their eyes to this notion that this has just been bunk science imposed on kids, and it's really dividing people who generally support the idea of, you know, gay rights. And it, to me, as a legislator, when I was in the Maine legislature, we passed, same-sex marriage. And the whole campaign was about love. It was about like, okay, the law should support a legal contract of two people who love each other and want to commit to supporting each other. It just made so much sense. And now that that law is in place and has been, you know, we have a Supreme Court decision, the Obergefell decision, that says two people, no matter what your sexual orientation is, you can get married. It seems to me as a society, we should be moving on, just labeling
Yeah.
everybody and just, are you single? Are you married? But I just hope that there's a break in this group think and people are going to kind of sort of come around to it. I mean, are you hopeful at all?
Well, the organizations that were supporting gay marriage and so forth, they kind of went over to the trans, and because they didn't want to lose their job, they had to find a new cause, so they expanded and they really went around the bend.
It really
It's like
seems
the
like it.
opposite. It's the opposite of freedom for people to, oh, you can't act that way or else we'll have to medicalize you.
It's and what's really interesting to me is that, conversion therapy was thought, a good thing for a little bit to, cure homosexuals of their disease by either medicating them or subjecting them to electric shock or therapy. And as a society, we moved forward beyond that and accepted that no homosexuality, same-sex attraction is is normal and it's good. It's good that people love each other. Now we're at a place where it's like reverse conversion therapy. It's just the most
Yes.
and I can't help but think that the medical industrial complex has something to do with this, and that the doctors and all the so-called professionals who are feeding this monster should be held responsible. I mean, do you see any, I don't know, any light at the end of the tunnel in terms of holding the medical profession accountable for this, I think, travesty of what they've
Yes.
subjected kids to?
There have been some lawsuits, like, against Hasbro Hospital, and, there's been quite a few lawsuits. Um, I can't name any offhand, but, let's see.
Yeah, well,
Um,
I'm glad to know that there's activism.
malpractice. Malpractice is, the transitioning of children, um, lifelong medical patients. It's a cash cow for them. And they've even admitted it. They on the WPATH files that was exposed by Mia Hughes, they were saying, this is all experimental. We don't know what we're doing.
What is that you just referred to, the W something
The
files?
WPATH files,
I've never heard of that.
WPATH. WPATH is the one that recommends treatment, gender treatments. And this was an inside look at their process and how they really don't know what they're doing. And they're just harming people without, and they don't even care. Medical fraud and malpractice has been attested to by endocrinologists, psychiatrists, and clinicians. Non-conforming children are rushed down the transgender conveyor belt. Lawsuits are starting. Kira Bell, I think, was the first one in England, and she eventually lost her case, but she established a beachhead, so that was good. Um, this is a book I wrote about the last 5 years. It's called Quandary: The Plight of Women Under Quackery. So
I like the alliteration.
I just feel like it's quackery, and you know, women have been the the victims. Women, gay people, and children have been the victims. The winners have been the white men and the people with power, people with money.
So it's like deja vu all over again. Not
Well,
funny, but, well, before we close, Marcia, it's been such a pleasure talking to you. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to the audience about pride and why like I said on Substack, you have Take Back June, Pride is cringe.
yeah.
How can we change it?
I would just de-emphasize it. I don't think it's important to have these parades and these big celebrations, especially when corporations are getting involved and everyone's putting the pride, or actually it's the progress flag. It's not the pride flag, the simple rainbow. Oh no, it's the progress flag with all these other groups and with this big chevron cutting into the rainbow.
Yeah.
And they're flying it on their town hall or, city hall.
To me, it's just so ironic that the so-called progress is for women, that we've been subsumed by men, subjugated once again. Like somehow the definition of women now includes men, and men can enter all single-sex spaces and be on sports teams. It's like it's one step forward, two steps back. Um, if people want to read that book, where do you get that book?
Well, it's not published. It's just right now it's just a manuscript.
Oh, good for
So,
you.
yeah.
Well,
Thank
Marcia
you.
Matthews, it's been such a pleasure talking to you, and I hope you can get through June. And and, until next time, this is
Thank
Cynthia Deal
you.
signing off. Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Cynthia. Bye.
Bye-bye.